Okay, I'm live. I found a playlist, so let's watch it. Day 2. Oh, I just realized I'm not sharing my screen. Okay, quit Chrome tabs.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, now with 100% more flash and 500% more audience pandering. Who says learning can't be exciting? This week, we're talking about the philosophies of Ayn Rand. Just long enough to say that we're not talking about the philosophies of Ayn Rand, because you know what? BioShock is a whole lot more than just an objectivist romp through a utopian society. It's an objectivist romp through an underwater utopian society, which, as we all know, increases its coolness by a factor of 23. But could we really build an underwater self-sufficient city like the developers depict in BioShock? This week we're looking at the science involved, from handling water pressure in undersea forests to geothermal energy and real-life millionaires currently working to make Rapture a reality. So would you kindly inject yourself with that used syringe of slug stem cells? 'Cause we're taking a trip under the sea. According to BioShock's official wiki, Rapture is located underwater a few hundred miles west of Iceland's capital city of... Any geography buffs out there?
Reykjavik.
Very good!
You say it
Gold
right,
star
but I
if
don't know
you
what it
can
is.
spell it. That area of the Atlantic is actually some of the shallowest ocean water on Earth, only about 656 feet deep, or 200 meters if you're a viewer who actually understands the appeal of soccer, football. Compare that to Marianas Trench, which has a depth the equivalent to cutting Mount Everest off at sea level, placing it on the ocean floor, and still having a mile of water on top. With water weighing in at 62.5 pounds per cubic foot, even in the shallows of the Atlantic Ocean, any architect of Andrew Ryan's would have to contend with an immense amount of pressure. But surprisingly, the solution to the problem exists right in your own kitchen cabinets. The Triton 36,000 is a new submarine set to explore the depths of Marianas Trench, making it only the 4th expedition in history to do so. That's right, there have been more missions to the moon than there have been to the bottom of the ocean. However, what makes this expedition different is that the sub is practically a glass sphere made out of Pyrex, the same stuff as in Mom's casserole dish. Unlike other materials, the Pyrex sphere will actually strengthen under the increasing water pressure. Why this superglass is necessary for the cup I use to measure the water going into my Easy Mac is beyond me. But here's the thing, the Pyrex name has been around since 1915, with its current formula being developed in the 1940s. According to the game, Rapture was finished in 1951, meaning that the city's network of rounded tubes and pipes could easily have been made from this pressure-resistant material. And the spherical bathysphere system, like the Triton sub, takes full advantage of using geometry to displace water pressure. However, the rest of BioShock's urban planning wouldn't hold nearly as well. The stone buildings and statues would erode faster than Lindsay Lohan's dignity, and the sharp geometric patterns of the city's Art Deco design would do nothing to evenly distribute the immense amount of pressure. In short, it's possible, but it ain't too smart. Building the structures, though, is only the first issue. How about oxygen? I mean, an underwater city is cool and all, but without air to breathe, it would kinda suck. Well, the game offers a solution. One mission has our hero, Jack, roaming through the hills of Arcadia, Rapture's undersea garden, to revive the trees that provide part of the city's crucial oxygen supply. In real life, an indoor ecosystem isn't the challenge here. The real problem is getting sunlight through the water and to the plants. The euphotic zone is the name given to the uppermost layer of the ocean where 70% of the world's photosynthesis takes place. However, this only extends 100 meters down, which, if you've been paying attention, is only half the maximum possible depth of the ocean where Rapture is located. Now, you know that I'm not one to take the easy way out. I mean, I practically illustrate every fifth word of my scripts. But here, I think it's accurate to say that Arcadia is simply located in the top of one of Rapture's tallest buildings. Because think about it, 300 or so feet up by building standards isn't that high to begin with, especially for a city modeled after New York. Look, I had an explanation already with light bulbs being able to recreate sunlight's natural wavelength, but if you see here, this area of the game is lit entirely by what's streaming in through the glass ceiling, meaning that this part of Rapture must be in the euphotic zone. So that's growing the garden, but what about the oxygen itself? Well, the plants are a nice touch, but like a degree in classical languages, they're pretty useless. You see, oxygen is easily produced from the electrolysis of water, which for Rapture, there's never a shortage of. Basically run an electrical current through the liquid and have it separate into hydrogen and oxygen. It's a process that's existed since 1800, and submarines have been doing it for years, so there's no doubt that Rapture could have easily incorporated it. No, the bigger issue is the removal of the waste carbon dioxide we breathe out. And sure, trees would make a little difference, but what's really necessary is a CO2 scrubber, a device which absorbs carbon dioxide out of the air so it can literally be thrown away like waste, a process that dates back to before 1878. It's an easy solution, making underwater living that much more enjoyable. So we have our buildings and we have our air supply. All we really need now is the power. The 8th level of Bioshock brings Jack to Hephaestus, the fiery furnace, a plant that uses the Earth's geothermal energy to produce the bulk of Rapture's electricity. And here is where the developers over at 2K show their brilliance. Because on land, utilizing the natural heat of Earth's molten interior poses multiple problems, including transporting it all the way to the surface and the fact that it's very location specific, meaning that you have to be around a convergence of two tectonic plates to harness the heat available in Earth's lower layers. But Rapture being on the seafloor eliminates the first problem altogether because you've already gotten rid of hundreds of feet of piping. As for the second, remember what I said a couple minutes ago about Rapture's location?
Reykjavik.
Iceland exists on the mid-Atlantic ridge and on a geological hotspot. What this means is that the country is loaded with geysers and volcanoes. As a result, over 50% of Iceland's total energy consumption comes from geothermal sources. And to wrap it all up in a nice little package, using geothermal energy in Iceland dates back to 1930, over 10 years before Rapture was even conceived, meaning that not only is it possible to build the city today, unbelievably, all the technology for an underwater city existed by the time Andrew Ryan started his plans in the 1940s. All told, it appears that Bioshock provides a decent lesson on underwater urban planning, plus the 40s setting is actually the year when the technology to make this possible all came together. So why hasn't this happened? Who says it hasn't? Have you researched the ocean floor around the mid-Atlantic ridge lately? I have. And my research didn't turn up anything. Still, the idea of oceanic living is catching on. Underwater restaurants, a secret underwater hotel planned off a private island in Fiji, a $1.5 billion underwater complex in Dubai, but most bio-shockingly of all, in 2008, a group of millionaires, including the founder of PayPal, started the Seasteading Institute, an organization dedicated to making independent floating ocean nations. Okay, so they're not underwater, but stick with me here, because this is a biggie. They want these floating, independent nations to run on libertarian principles. Laissez-faire, hands-off, each man entitled to the sweat of his brow. In other words, Andrew Ryan's, and yes, Ayn Rand's philosophy. Okay, so we didn't get through the whole episode without mentioning her again, sorry. The first test of this is set to happen near the San Francisco Bay sometime coming soon, so keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, I recommend that everyone throw away their retro scuba gear and pour salt on any suspicious-looking slugs. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Hello, Internet! MatPat here.
Ditch Mr. Bubbles and bring your little sister, because this week is going to be
Is life messing with your sleep? At Ollie, we get it. You're about to get
Fanboys and fangirls unite because we're bearing the naked truth behind video gaming's most famous murder. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show where our favorite limit break is Mind Blow. Final Fantasy VII, one, if not the most loved and reviled games of all time. A game so defended by fans and so attacked by haters that no reviewer dare touch it. But here, we don't and bad. We look at truth, and often that truth is more shocking than Aerith's death halfway through this game. Oh, should I have put up a spoiler alert? Too bad, get out from under your rock. But this rather well-devised segue brings me to my main point. Have I really spoiled anything? Based on her wounds, should Aerith have died? In fact, does she die at all? This week we're looking at the anatomy of a murder that has rocked the gaming world since 1997, and I guarantee the truth will shatter what you thought you knew about this unforgettable and heartbreaking moment in gaming history. Let's start by setting the scene. Aerith, innocent flower girl from the slums of Midgar, is found alone, praying for the protection of the planet. Chances are, if you're not a teenage boy fascinated by PlayStation-era jiggle physics, Aerith is your female character of choice. Her vigil, however, gets a rude interruption when Sephiroth, the heartthrob of game villains, rams his impossibly long sword through her torso. Insert your own joke here. Fast forward to her slumping over, Sephi dislodging his massive weapon, Aerith losing her magic marble, RPG fans the world over weeping sad, bitter tears, touching water burial, and cosplayers around the world erecting shrines to their fallen heroine. Sorry, got a little choked up. Pardon my big, manly tears. Anyway, that concludes your tutorial. But what really happened? Let's rewind. First, the actual stabbing. Viewers affectionate towards fictional women may want to look away. Notice the magical brown belt that just appears out of nowhere halfway through this scene? Ha! Not only is this a glaring and embarrassing graphical oversight for Square, it gives us a great guide to where the sword is going. Here, we see that it's a straight shot right through, from the middle of her back to the middle of her front. Superimposing a skeleton onto her body, we see that the sword is penetrating right below her sternum, the central bone of the rib cage. So it's definitely going through her abdomen in the front, and piercing her vertebral column, and thus her spinal cord in the back. Listening to the scene backs this story up. If I know my sounds of horrific death, and I most certainly do, these are the dulcet tones of steel scraping on bone. Looking at another diagram, we see that the sword is too low to hit the heart and lungs, but the liver, stomach, and perhaps the intestines might suffer some damage. And with one final diagram, we see that the inferior vena cava and the descending aorta both follow the path of the spine, and are thus targets for the sword. Overall, I feel confident in saying that this would be a serious injury. Death would seem certain. But look again, my CSIs in training. What's missing? I'll give you a second. Dear viewer, I ask you, where's the blood? There isn't a drop to be found anywhere. And before you rush off to the comments saying, oh, they didn't want to make the game too graphic, they clearly use blood elsewhere in the game. First, smeared across the walls when Sephiroth slaughters everyone at the Shinra headquarters, and, more noticeably, when you finally defeat the white-haired weirdo. But Aerith shows no injury. How can this be? Well, miraculously, it's been done before, and all joking aside, if you're squeamish, you might want to look away for this part. In 1947, Time magazine reported on a Dutchman named Miran Dajo, a man who claimed to be invulnerable. He dumbfounded medical experts at the time by piercing his body with swords, spears, and various blades without causing himself any internal injuries or bleeding. There were also reports of him surviving boiling water, burning irons, and being shot in the head. It's said that he learned his methods from ancient religious holy men named fakirs. Wait, an ancient and mystical people? Did I mention that Aerith is a Cetra, an ancient, a deeply spiritual people with mystical abilities? Seems like a very important detail to have mentioned right now. Alright, so say that through part miracle and part mysticism, there is no bleeding or organ damage. Why does she collapse? Well, you can't get around the fact that the sword severed her spine. I mean, no case of scoliosis is that bad, and we even heard it. Let's look at one last diagram. The spine is divided into 4 sections based on its location in the body. Cervical for the head and neck, thoracic for the chest and stomach, lumbar for the lower back, and sacral for around your pelvis. Because
Holy crap, that's a long dick. Just saying.
4 sections based on its location in the body. Cervical for the head and neck, thoracic for the chest and stomach, lumbar for the lower back, and sacral for around your pelvis. Because the spine is the highway of information from your brain to the rest of your body, injuring it is like causing a bad car wreck, ceasing traffic further down the road. Based on the sword's position, it looks like it pierces through the T7 vertebrae, or the 7th bone down in the thoracic section. An injury to this part of the spine not only destroys your ability to move your legs, but it would also prevent you from controlling your abdominal muscles. In other words, you wouldn't be able to hold yourself up. You would just slump over like a rag doll or a corpse. However, Aerith would still have control over her arms and head, so why wouldn't she move for the rest of the scene? Spinal injuries can result in extreme dilation of the blood vessels, meaning that not enough blood would make it to the cells, resulting in shock and eventually knocking her unconscious. What I'm saying is this: stabbing, slumping over, and closing your eyes doesn't necessarily mean that she was dead. In fact, no blood, loss of abdominal control from a spinal injury, and unconsciousness due to shock means that Aerith could easily have been alive when she was set adrift. You mean that Aerith could still be alive? I understand if you need further proof, so let's look at one last nail in Aerith's non-existent coffin. During her sentimental burial, she sure does sink like a stone, doesn't she? Funny, considering that dead bodies tend to float for a while as oxygen is trapped in their lungs. Eventually, they do sink when the air in their lungs is replaced with water seeping into their system. Live bodies, however, have a harder time staying afloat because of the tension in their muscles and the fluctuations of oxygen in their system. Aerith's lack of buoyancy would hint at her still being alive. Why not swim to save herself then? Don't forget that she'd still be suffering from a bad case of unconsciousness mixed with an unhealthy dose of paralysis. Wait, so Aerith might still be alive? Let's look at the whole tragic scene play out once again. Sephiroth impales Aerith, paralyzing her from the chest down. Miraculously, all vital organs and blood vessels are spared as not a drop of blood is spilled. However, with an injured spinal cord, Aerith collapses as she can no longer support herself upright. The scare sends her into shock and she passes out, unconscious. Cloud, not the brightest clone of the bunch, assumes she's dead and sets her to drift, and her still living body rapidly sinks. Wait, a living body, underwater and unable to swim? Then that means... yes, it's even worse than we thought. To put it bluntly, it's very possible that the true murderer wasn't Sephiroth on the altar with the sword. Instead, Aerith may have unintentionally drowned when Cloud set her unconscious body in the water. In a sense, she was buried alive. And that, my friends, puts an even crueler twist on the most shocking, painful, and heart-wrenching scene in gamedom. Aerith, everyone agrees that you left us too soon, and we, as gamers, were forced to comfort ourselves in the large, warm cushions of Tifa's chest. Or was that just me? Anyway, it's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
And next video.
Oh, hey! I was just going for a drive, which is wild because
Get ready for an upgrade, because this week we're rebuilding you better, stronger, and faster. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that artificially augments your mind every week. I know this may stun a lot of you, but I like smart games. What? At this point, that's about as surprising as saying Tingle from the Legend of Zelda series isn't exactly what you would call straight. I mean, when your breakout titles are Color Change Balloon Trip, you can just stop pretending. Anyway, this love of brain stimulation means that I get all inside when I spot a smart shooter on the horizon, especially when it's the sequel to PC Gamer's best PC game of all time. We're talking Deus Ex: Human Revolution. For those of you unfamiliar with the original, if Borderlands and BioShock had a kid who liked cyberpunk and had an affinity for tinfoil hats, that would be Deus Ex, a futuristic RPG shooter with plasmid-like upgrades and a plot straight out of a Dan Brown novel. But where the original was set in 2052, Human Revolution is a prequel story taking place in 2027, meaning that the nanotechnology that gave you superhuman-like powers in the original hasn't been developed yet, replaced instead by more primitive biomechanical enhancements, human-robot hybrids, or in other words, cyborgs. So the question posed to us today is this: 16 years from now, in 2027, will biomechanical technology have come far enough to enable our own human revolution? Let's find out. Like its predecessor, Human Revolution's augmentations apply to specific body parts, ranging from the eyes and cranium to the arms, legs, torso, and skin. For example, one upgrade for the eyes allows you to see through walls, which happens to be useful both in combat situations and outside the girls' locker room. Ha! Yeah, that's creepy. And yes, though we do indeed have the technology to see through walls, it won't be incorporated into the body anytime soon. However, that's not to say that the eye hasn't been receiving a bionic upgrade. For example, check out Rob Spence, aka Eyeborg. This documentary filmmaker lost his right eye as a child and has since worked with a team of researchers to create a false eye fitted with a tiny wireless camera that allows him to film everything he sees during the day and then download it onto a computer at night. The eye is also equipped with a glowing red light that sends a clear message to people walking past him on the street. That message? Hey, I'm creepy. He's confident that in 10 years, the technology will be able to link into the brain, allowing the blind to see. But that's already starting to happen. Enter the Argus 2 and similar projects that are experimenting with cameras that transmit visual information wirelessly to electrode arrays implanted in the back of the eye. The electrical pulses are transmitted to the brain via the optic nerve, resulting in very rudimentary sight. But coolest of all these, meet Neil Harbison. He was born with achromatopsia, a condition that restricts him to seeing the world in black and white. However, with the help of an inventor friend, he's now able to see colors by hearing them. That device on his head is also named the Eyeborg. Hey, I may use bad puns, but at least they're mostly original. Like sound, light is also a series of wavelengths. Neil's Eyeborg is able to slow down those wavelengths from the visible spectrum into the audible range. Red, which has a lower frequency in the color spectrum, becomes one of the lowest pitches. Violet, which is a much higher frequency of light, becomes a higher pitch of sound. However, this also works in reverse, with normal everyday sounds having a color in his mind. For example, Neil perceives the hum of his vacuum cleaner as red, and the white noise of Madrid as a city as part sky blue and part cream. Moving on, you've heard of thumb drives, but how about a ring finger drive? In Human Revolution, one set of cranial augmentations enhances your character's ability to hack into turrets, computers, keypads, and alarm systems. But why use your brain to hack when you can let your fingers do the talking? Like this Finnish programmer who, after losing his ring finger in a 2009 motorcycle accident, had a 2 GB USB drive installed in his prosthesis. Haha, that's one way to improve your memory. But seriously, is keeping it on your keychain really that hard? And only 2 gigs? It's about time he upgraded his finger, don't you think? So we have a mechanical finger, but how about a whole arm? Arm enhancements in Deus Ex offer a range of awesome skills. Superhuman strength, reducing weapon recoil, and my personal favorite, the ability to break through walls like Kool-Aid's Big Man. Oh yeah! Even though real-life bionic arms may not be able to give you abnormal strength or mascot-like wall-shattering powers, they're still making a huge impact. Take, for instance, the iLim, the latest in bionic arms and the latest to rip off Apple's product naming system. It features the first fully articulating prosthetic hand with 5 independent mechanical fingers that are able to mimic a normal grip. And it's all controlled by 2 contacts sitting on the skin that are able to read the wearer's muscle activity. Just think about moving your hand and it reacts. The iLim might not be able to move fast enough to play the piano like in this Deus Ex ad, but what it lacks in speed, it makes up for in 360-degree rotation. However, if you want someone who is truly a modern-day bionic man, look no further than Jesse Sullivan, a former power line worker who, in 2001, was electrocuted so severely that both his arms had to be amputated. Since then, the Research Institute of Chicago has relocated 4 nerves from Jesse's shoulder to his chest, where they're now able to signal the fine movements of the arms and hand. Like the iLim, just thinking about the movement causes slight muscle contractions, which are translated as mechanical movement in the arms. With 2 bionic arms, that officially makes Jesse the first real-life Jax, circa Mortal Kombat 3 when he actually started to become cool. And if there's a bionic arm, that means there's also a leg, right? Absolutely. In the game, upgrading your legs allows you to run farther, jump higher, and move more stealthily. And it's kind of the same in real life. The newest wave of replacement legs uses a series of sensors attached to the ankle of the good leg to read the user's current movement. It then sends this information to software housed in the bionic leg, which translates the information into a movement profile, predicting the next motion the mover desires and then executing it. With power at both the knee and ankle joints, for the first time, those with a false leg can have a normal walking gait and the ability to climb stairs naturally instead of having to limp using a regular passive prosthesis. But as always, we've saved the best for last. Someone who has already begun the real-life human revolution by controlling electronics with his mind. In 2000, at Reading University in England, implanted a silicone chip into the nerves of his arm. He was then hooked into a computer which read the signals traveling from his brain to his arm, translating these as radio waves. This eventually gave him the ability to control an elect wheelchair and lights with just his brain signals. He was like a human clapper. He could also hook his brain up to the internet, already a weird thing to be saying, where he was able to get a robotic hand 5,000 kilometers away to copy his own hand's movement. But for his most important experiment, his wife also had a chip installed. It sure takes a special kind of woman. Anyway, the two were hooked up via the internet, and when she moved her hand, he was able to feel impulses going through his own body and vice versa. They were actually communicating through just their thoughts in a very rudimentary form of telepathy. Now that's progress. Which brings us back to our initial question. Will we be living out our own Deus Ex in 16 years? In a way, we already are. A central point in the game's story is the struggle between those wanting to stay purely human and those improving on humanity's design through mechanical enhancements. And even though Kevin Warwick guesses that in 30 years everyone will have a chip in their brain, his work has already come under fire. I think the game's right. This issue will come to a head one day. Maybe not as soon as 16 years, but definitely sooner than we think. So the best I can say is this: play the game, experience the future, and decide which side you're gonna be on. I look forward to seeing your discussions in the comments. But hey, it's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Buy a lot on Amazon, protect a lot with
Stick in your hair hose and start pumping, cause this week we're fit to burst! Ah!
Could have worked that. Could have not worked that anymore.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that unites video games and the real world every week. Why am I popping tomatoes in playgrounds, you ask?
Because internet research alone wouldn't cover it this week, so we're going on location to do some research into one of the sickest, most violent, and disgusting games of all time, Dig Dug.
In this Namco arcade classic, you play as Taizo Hori, a character whose blue skin and white jumpsuit make him look like a Smurf reject. And maybe having nobody Smurf and passive-aggressive Smurf get chosen over him is what sent old Dig Dug over the edge, because Taizo is a homicidal maniac. Your one and only goal in the game is to dig underground and slaughter all the innocent tomatoes and lizards living there. Pukas and frygars, I mean. Seriously, look at these guys. They're about as scary as stuffed animals. The pukas can't even attack. And here you are invading their homes for no reason. No money, no kidnapped princess, not even in self-defense. Nope, Taizo kills because to him, death is just a game, awarding him more points for killing with skill, like an old school bullet storm. But it's not enough to break into a puka's home and say, shoot him. Oh no. Dig Dug features one of the most painful, gruesome ways to die in gaming by injecting his victims with an air pump, then inflating their still living bodies until they explode. Now, as a lover of all things cute and lolcats, I am appalled. So we're turning the tables on Taizo this week to look at whether it's possible to inflate a human until they pop. And be warned, it's gross, it's disturbing, it's game theory. Before we look at the possibility of death, it's worth pointing out some of the underground communities that find body inflation appealing. Take, for instance, the Bagel Heads of Japan, a club culture that modifies their bodies by injecting saline solution under their skin so that it puffs up in the shape of a bagel. Or the hundreds of people who swap tales and pictures over the internet of ballooning body parts, or who literally use balloons to alter their figure. The patrons Beauregard from Willy Wonka, and I'm only partially about that. And then there's the stuff of nightmares. The super creepy rubber suit community with members like Mr. Blow Up here, a British man who has built himself a variety of inflatable suits and other things, because, personally, I don't want to know. How does his wife feel about all this? She thought it was a good idea too! Personally, I think the scariest part of this image is his dental work. I mean, man, way to reinforce British stereotypes there. In any case, good luck trying to clear your head of these mental images for the rest of the episode. Suffice it to say that human inflation is a bizarre topic, so surprise, surprise, there haven't been many experiments performed on the possibility of humans bursting like bubbles. But we as gamers need to know the truth about this arcade classic, and I'm proud to say that I've dug it up. Don't start. Just 4 months ago, truck driver Stephen McCormick of New Zealand became the world's first human balloon. While at his company's workshop, he slipped and broke the air hose off a brass nipple, controlling the compressed air tanks used for his truck's brakes. The nipple entered his butt. Oh, this just gets better and better. Where it started to fill his body with air at a rate of 100 pounds per square inch. As he continued to expand, McCormick said that he felt like his foot would pop and that his skin began to feel like a pot roast, crackling on the outside, but soft underneath. He became so inflated that the fat and muscle of his body actually separated. Luckily, coworkers were able to remove the nipple from his butt before, well, we don't really know what would have happened, do we? That's what we're trying to find out. Anyway, the story ends with 3 awkward days of deflation in the hospital. Just how do you deflate a human? Steven explains.
So you just have to fart it out or burp it out.
Fortunately for old Steve, he survived, but unfortunately for me, that means more research. So back at the drawing board, I realized that there's more than one way to pop a human. Sure, you can inflate them with air, but you can also decrease the air pressure around them. Think about any space movie where the pressurized suit rips, like in Total Recall or Outland. One tear and your insides are splattering your face shield. The reasoning behind this is that in a vacuum like space, there would be no air pressure pushing down on the outside of your body. However, the gases in your body would be pushing out, and the water in your soft tissues would turn to gases, causing you to expand until popping, like this balloon here. However, though it was a good lead, we just hit another wall because this is just a movie myth. During testing for the Apollo space program, a pressure suit failed, exposing the wearer to near vacuum conditions. He passed out after 15 seconds due to a lack of oxygen in the brain, but was revived when pressure returned. His last reported memory was the saliva on his tongue boiling. But his blood and other fluids didn't turn to gas because the body's internal containing pressure kept them in liquid form. And the minor swelling that would indeed occur was easily handled with the elasticity of the skin. There is one take-home message though, and that's if you're ever planning on entering the cold reaches of space without a suit, don't hold your breath. The gases could cause permanent internal damage. So even the extremes of space were no help this week. Instead, the answer was underwater. The Byford Dolphin is the name of a drilling rig contracted by BP. In 1983, it made news as perhaps the world's only recorded case of explosive decompression. In short, 5 men were killed when an operator's error caused their diving chamber to instantly drop in pressure from 9 atmospheres to 1. One of those men, the one who experienced the biggest pressure differential, actually did explode in a way very similar to this moment in the James Bond flick License to Kill. However, the other 4, despite also experiencing the pressure blast and having their bodies boiled from the inside out, stayed intact. So suffice it to say, it is possible to inflate someone until they burst, but it takes an unbelievable amount of pressure under an unbelievably short amount of time. A hand pump alone won't cut it.
Which brings us to our on-location research. Because in the game, you're not inflating humans, you're popping pukas, an enemy originally inspired by the tomato. So just how many pumps does it take to pop a puka? Let's find out.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's man. Oh my god.
So that was only 2 pumps. In the end, each tomato took about 1 to 2 good full pumps, meaning that if Dig Dug were 100% true to life, the game would have been a whole lot easier. However, it also means that the skin of the tomato is a lot less elastic than human flesh, so the way pukas pop in the game is fairly accurate to their real-life inspiration. Design team win. With tomato guts flying everywhere though, how Taizo keeps his jumpsuit so clean is beyond me. Maybe we'll have to check that out on another episode. Popping humans, popping tomatoes, it doesn't matter. It's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Ooh, Pokemon.
Lots of items on sale.
Pokemon.
Prices start at just $2.99. Score 50% off spring floral and green.
Prepare for trouble and make it triple, because this week it's a Pokemon battle, round 1. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the rare candy of your web video experience. Let's face it, Pokemon is an adorable game. Around the age of 10, trainers receive a cute starter animal that becomes their best friend while they travel the countryside to meet new people, engage in fun tournaments, and add to their animal collection. What's not to like? A lot, considering that the series has been attacked on all sides by practically every institution.
I forgot to add audio, didn't I? Oh. Just get it a good on and off.
Imaginable. Creationist groups claim it's brainwashing our children into believing evolution and that the Pokerap contains satanic messages. Parent groups say that it teaches violence and brutality towards animals. Ethnic groups have said that the games embrace racial stereotypes and are pro-Nazi. And wildest of all, 2 9-year-old boys sued Nintendo because they claimed that Pokemon caused their problematic gambling addiction. Jeez, calm down, people. It's just a kid's game. Or is it? Because there's so much ground to cover, we're dedicating 3 episodes to uncovering the truth behind the supposed evils of the Pokemon universe. This week, we're taking on evolution. Do creationists have a case here? Is this game brainwashing our children into thinking that we are the descendants of apes? And when we start belting out, I wanna be the very best, are we actually singing our praises to the Underlord? Get your openers ready because we've got a can of worms with our name on it. The creationist evolution debate is no small issue. Polls over the last 5 years have consistently shown that about 40% of Americans believe in creationism, or the theory that God created humans on Earth within the last 10,000 years. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the other 60% believe in evolution. Oh no. These same polls have shown that at most, evolutionists make up another 40%, leaving about 20% undecided. For example, of the 51 contestants competing in this year's Miss USA pageant, only 2 unequivocally supported Darwin's origin of the species, which means Charmander would be flipping a big middle finger to a huge proportion of Americans, if he actually had a middle finger. To see if these creationist claims have any legs to stand on, we need to first understand Darwin's theory. Evolution is defined as the change over time in the inherited traits found within a population. Certain inherited traits make a creature better equipped to survive, which means they'll produce more offspring than those individuals without that trait. And just by looking at the definition, we've already debunked the creationist argument. When a Pokemon evolves in the game, it's a single Pokemon changing forms in that moment, not across generations. A Zubat's mouth hanging open isn't transferring from parent to offspring generation after generation until one day you have a Golbat with a giant yapper. In fact, Pokemon evolution doesn't involve mating at all. A Nidoqueen and Nidoking exercising their royal duty results in a Nidoran, not another Nidoking. If anything, Pokemon evolution involves a rock. Figure that one out. So all in all, creationists should be complaining that Pokemon is misinforming our children about the process of descent with modification. To further prove the point, evolution in the real world is the passing of traits that make a living creature more fit to survive and reproduce. However, many of the changes that happen in Pokemon evolutions are just useless, making these guys look like they took a dip in the shallow end of the gene pool. Take for instance Voltorb's colors switching halves when he evolves into an Electrode. No survival advantage there. Or how about Generation 5's Litwick evolving into a Chandelure? Great, my candle Pokemon evolved into a Chandelier Pokemon. A lot of help that's gonna do him out in the wild. But even worse are the evolutions that would make a character less likely to survive. Take for instance Lickitung evolving to Licky Licky. He becomes fatter, rendering his already pathetic arms even more useless. His 6'6" tongue becomes shorter, and he has that anime monkey turd on his head. Where Lickitung was odd but functional, this guy is just a loser practically begging the Machamps to give him a swirly. Based on that thing on his head, he's probably already gotten a few. But then there's the worst offenders of all, Vanillite, Vanillish, and Vanillux. Not only is it a stupid design, in my book, the more ice cream, the better. So each evolution just makes me more likely to eat your frosty ass. A double scoop cone with a flake wafer to boot? Sorry, you're not a Pokemon, you're a dessert. Get in my belly. So if it's not
Probably
evolution,
just tastes like
what
pure
is
ice
it?
to me,
Well,
yes.
for most Pokemon, it could be considered metamorphosis, or an abrupt change in an animal's behavior and body structure. For example, a Weedle turns into a Kakuna and Beedrill in the same way a caterpillar becomes a chrysalis and then a butterfly. This is called holometabolis or complete metamorphosis because the immature larval stages look extremely different from the adult form. Compare that to hemimetabolis or incomplete metamorphosis, where the immature stage called the nymph looks similar to the adult but is smaller and lacks in certain features like wings or sexual organs. Evolutions like Pedes to Parasect and Scyther to Caesar would fit into this category. And metamorphosis isn't just limited to insects. In real life, the process takes place in amphibians, crustaceans, and even some fish. So the polywags evolving into
Well, it is just
polypodes are just mirroring the real world complete metamorphosis of tadpoles to frogs. Magcargo, Shelder, the list could go on and on. It's even been theorized that plants may undergo a type of metamorphosis too. And evolutions like Burmy to Wormadam are actually experiencing a type of hyper-metamorphosis, where there are multiple, very distinct larval stages. As far as the other types are concerned, ghosts are able to change shape anyway, so there's no big concern there. And robotic evolution for the likes of Magnetite and Magnezone, I refer you to the episode A Clockwork Origin of Futurama. It's instant play on Netflix. You know what to do. All that leaves out are your mammal Pokemon like Mankey and Teddiursa, where the best science can say is growth spurt? In other words, puberty meets Pikachu. So evolution is off the table, but what about the Pokerap's satanic messages? They say that if you play the Pokerap backwards, the phrase "gotta catch 'em all" translates to "I love Satan." An odd claim, considering that in order to say "I love Satan," you need an S sound, which, unless you have a really bad speech impediment where you hiss every time you pronounce a CH sound, it ain't gonna happen. In fact, none of the sounds in "I love Satan" appear in "gotta catch 'em all." Yeah, I really hear a V sound in there. But to be fair, let's listen to it anyway.
Gotta catch 'em all, 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 Pokemon.
Well, of course it sounds like the chorus from HE Double Hockey Sticks. It's human speech played backwards, but a satanic message? No. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to say 10 Hail Marys to atone for saying "I love Satan" so many times. All in all, we've seen today that Pokemon is not pro-science or anti-God. It just skipped 7th grade biology and has a catchy theme song. So that's 1 attacker down and 2 to go. Join us next time as we take up the flag rights activism to see who the biggest threat is in the Pokemon universe. The trainers or the villainous teams you battle. It's a multi-part series, so make sure you catch up, because right now you only have 1/3 of the theory. The game theory. Thanks for watching.
There's a part 3.
Oh.
Hold on to your Pokeballs, because this week we're taking an up-close look at one huge cockfight. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory. When it comes to improving your mind, this show is super effective. Part 1 of our Pokepalooza proved that Pikachu is, in fact, not the spawn of Satan with a secret plan to lure young gamers into a Darwinian cult. Phew! I knew I was worried that my children might be learning about well-substantiated scientific theories. But these adorable pocket monsters aren't out of the woods just yet, because this week we're checking out Pokemon as Bloodsport. When parent groups rage against these games claiming that they depict violence towards animals, are they right? Are trainers just glorified animal abusers? It's a concern that was even addressed directly through the villains of Pokemon Black and White, Team Plasma, a team whose philosophy was to free all Pokemon from their supposed human enslavement. Are these Renaissance fair wannabes really evil,
I don't have a
or are they
webcam,
just the
so I
first
can't
ones
really
to
show
speak
it,
some
but
sense in the
I can, like,
Pokeverse?
play it
Strap
audio.
yourselves in, because this week is going to get a little unexpected. Yeah, I deserve it this time.
Where is
First,
my...
let's break down exactly
Fist.
what happens in a Pokemon battle. 2 trainers enter a one-on-one duel. Each has a team of pocket monsters at their command that have
just
been
not in
specially
characters.
trained
Okay.
so that they're the
in the
strongest
bag.
possible fighters. Some have even been bred to battle. The 2 animals then take turns biting, tackling, and body slamming each other until one faints. Along the way, they cause each other status effects, including burns, poisoning, and even paralysis. Once an entire team is collapsed, laps, the other trainer is declared the victor and receives a set amount of Poké-Dollars as a prize. Walk 3 steps, cross another bug catcher's line of vision, repeat the process. Battle until your Pokemon need a trip to the hospital where Nurse Joy can give them some TLC. Now compare this to real-world blood sports, where violence between animals is turned into competitive entertainment. The two
You all
most
hear
known
it?
blood sports are cockfights and dogfights, but betta fish, crickets, canaries, and even spiders are other common combatants. Like in Pokemon, the animals are specially trained and bred to be fighters. For example, any of you with a terrier for a pet, especially a bull terrier, your pet's ancestral heritage lies with being bred to win in dogfights. Training will often entail beatings and starvation to make the animal fiercer in the ring. Matches are most often one-on-one and can be either lethal or non-lethal, with dogs biting each other, betta fish slamming their bodies together, spiders poisoning and paralyzing each other. At the end of the match, the winning trainer receives prize money. Afterwards, stitch up your injured Pokemon, a dog or chicken, so that they can fight on another day. Capturing, breeding, and training animals to battle each other until one can't fight anymore, then winning prize money at the end? Sounds awfully familiar. The only redeeming factor for Pokemon is that there are no negative medical effects to frequent fainting spells. But that's only if you overlook the fact that a Pokemon is electrocuted with lightning bolts, scorched with flamethrowers, wrapped in vines, and shot by high-pressure water pumps until they can no longer remain conscious. And if there's any question of whether these attacks actually hurt the Pokemon, I refer you to my favorite episode of the anime, The Battle of the Badge, where the rules are just a little bit different. I'll let James explain.
In that box, the trainer feels all the pain the Pokemon feels.
Not so eager to battle now, are you?
Just think, if every battle had this feature, trainers wouldn't be nearly so eager to throw down their balls. And if forcing your favorite pet to get dragon beamed for the 20th time wasn't bad enough, what about animal neglect? A neglect inspired by the gotta catch 'em all mentality. Who else uses their Wobbuffets or their Mime Juniors? How about Pichu or that entire alphabet of unknown? But you have them simply because you had to complete your collection. And what are they doing now? Just sitting in their collection box, stuck in that tiny little ball, an eternity of solitary confinement when they could be out roaming in the grasses and caves, stepping around the hundreds of fainted Caterpies, Rattatas, and Pidgeys left there by level-grinding trainers. Wild Pokemon with no trainer to take them to Nurse Joy. Cruel. Just cruel any way you cut it. There's no positive spin here, no amount of research that can make this look good. Team Plasma and parents are right. Pokemon are slaves to their trainers. Ash Ketchum, you, sir, should be ashamed. But does that make Team Plasma the true heroes? Remember, they said that they want to free Pokemon and thus place them on equal footing with humanity. But how do they achieve this goal? By battling Pokemon. Ideology fail. But apart from engaging in obvious hypocrisy, they also use theft, subliminal messages in people's dreams, and threats of worldwide violence to achieve their end. This seems pretty extreme. Let's look at how real-world animal rights activists would deal with this issue. Like PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Their campaigns are often humorous, like offering free veggie burgers to the town of Hamburg, New York if it changes its name to Veggieburg, New York, or making a Flash parody of the game Super Meat Boy, Super Tofu Boy. They've even taken my approach to using sex to sell their message, featuring scantily clad females and starting their own softcore pornography site. Alright, even I haven't gone that far. Oh, but it says here that they've also presented photo exhibits comparing slaughtered animals to Holocaust victims. And then there's their comics like Your Mommy Kills Animals, propaganda that's clearly targeting children. Well, aside from occasionally throwing red paint on a fur coats, their methods are entirely legal. But maybe we should look at a different group. This looks good. ALF, the 80s beer-swilling alien sitcom star. Sorry, Google result fail. The ALF, or Animal Liberation Front, the self-proclaimed underground railroad of animal protection. Their methods are illegal, stealing animals from farms and labs and destroying facilities. Huh. But their stance is strictly non-violent, avoiding any harm to humans at all costs. Good, good. But not all ALF members agreed that humans should be protected. As a result, some members of the extreme end of the group have branched off to form a separate arm named ARM, the Animal Rights Militia. Their first act was sending bombs in the mail to... Sending bombs in the mail to 5 British parliamentary leaders, including then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Subsequent attacks have used car bombs. Even more bizarre tactics have them robbing the graves of former leaders of animal testing labs and even poisoning food products across large supermarket chains. Team Plasma was moderate by these real-world standards. So the take-home question is this. Where do you draw the line? Clearly, Pokemon trainers are wrong by making animal violence a sport, but Team Plasma is in the wrong too, using illegal methods, threats of violence, and brainwashing to forward their ends in much the same way the ALF, ARM, and PETA have destroyed company property, attacked governmental leaders, and tried to brainwash children. Yes, you're defending creatures that can't defend themselves, and yes, clearly animal abuse is a horrific practice. But how far is too far? Is relying solely on legal methods of change a fruitless endeavor? There's so many questions, and personally, I'd love to sit here and discuss these ethical dilemmas, but I've got steaks on the grill. Join us next week for Pokemon Part 3 as we look at Hitler. In the meantime, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Can someone pass the A1? Prepare for trouble and make it triple, because this week
I've right.
cross your heart and hope to die, because this week's episode is gonna suck. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory. And happy Halloween, my little nightmare creatures. Oh, what's that? Halloween was Monday, you say? Ha! Well, I'm working on this episode at 10 p.m. on All Hallows Eve, so that should show you how dedicated I am to all of you. Or how pathetic my social life is. Speaking of which, I love Dracula. Back in the first grade, when I was just a wee little tot, we had to fill out this form talking about all of our favorite things. One of the questions was, who are your role models? My answer, Mom, Dad, and Dracula. Weird, right? A few questions later, when I was asked what I wanted to learn that year, I said chemistry, so you can tell I was a confused child. Anyway, 2 years ago, I finally got to meet the Count in person and drive a stake through his undead heart. I was also brutally assaulted by his 3 vampire maidens, but that's another story. And for as long as I've been a Vladaholic, I've also been a Castlevania fan. During college, I finally took the time to play through every single game in the series, both the highs and the lows.
They're huge.
While slogging through the 4th Symphony of the Night clone, I began to wonder how faithful these games were to Bram Stoker's original description of the Count. Nowadays, with so many years of movies, games, and TV shows that abuse vampire lore, yeah, I'm looking at you, Sparkles. You have to ask, how much power was Drac originally given? So this week, we're looking at nearly 40 Castlevania games to see which one features the most accurate version of the original Caped Crusader. Let's start off with a huge spoiler about Castlevania games. Ready? Dracula is the final boss. Huh, shocking, right? So if you were expecting a fire-breathing lizard or, I don't know, a large-mouthed bass, I'm sorry to ruin the surprise. But not all games in the franchise feature the toothy Transylvanian, so let's just eliminate those right off the bat. Next, a pro tip. When you fight Dracula, aim for the head. In most games, the first form of Dracula can only be damaged by a good, old-fashioned whip to the face. Yeah, pop his head off. Why has game theory suddenly devolved into a walkthrough video, you ask? Well, the strategy has a literary basis. According to Bram Stoker's novel, the only way to kill a vampire for good is to decapitate him before impaling the body with a wooden stake. And here's another surprise. It doesn't even have to be wooden. Or a stake. Silver stakes or even a sacred bullet are said to work. In fact, the novel has Dracula dying when a knife goes through his heart. But since none of the games have you using stakes, wooden or otherwise, against anything other than a stupid glowing orb, decapitation is the closest the series gets. The funny thing is, after centuries of fighting the Prince of Darkness, the Belmonts still wonder why they have to kill Dracula so many times. It's because you're doing it wrong. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if that's been their plan all along, injuring Dracula just enough so that he keeps coming back every 100 years. It keeps them in a job, and I'm sure the villagers shower them with money and women when they're done. The Belmont conspiracy. Anyway, it's just a theory. A game theory. Wait, we're not done yet. So now that we've eliminated the games where you can injure Dracula by attacking his body, here's another surprise. Bram Stoker's original Dracula isn't killed by sunlight. According to chapter 18 of the novel, he loses his powers during the day, but he doesn't burst into flames or melt into a skeleton or twinkle like a disco ball. The sunlight death is actually a much more recent development, dating back to, as far as I can find, the 1922 film Nosferatu, which was a copyright-infringing ripoff of Bram Stoker's ideas. Because the film couldn't get the rights to the novel, they changed a couple things, including Count Dracula's name to Count Orlok. In any event, the sunlight death eliminates installments like Super Castlevania 4. Moving away from his death, maybe the way he looks will help us narrow the field further. In the book, he's described as an old man dressed in all black, with white hair, a mustache, and pointed ears. Later, it's mentioned that he has a pointed beard, hooked nose, and blue eyes that turn red when angered. A few games come close to capturing this description, but I would say that Castlevania 64 and its counterpart, Legacy of Darkness, capture the image perfectly. Back in the novel, dead. I should be dead.
Oh,
I
York,
have
I
so
knew him
many
well.
feelings.
What else is
Surtur
getting
will be
famous?
unleashed from the south, flinging fire over the earth with his flaming sword, purging the world and killing major gods in his wake. So the birth of the universe, or the death of the world? The deciding factor here is the fact that there are survivors of Ragnarok, including 2 humans that find a way to hide from Surtur's fire. Plus, we can assume that Surtur came out of the universe egg that Kronos hatched. So what have we learned? 1. Zillion takes the point, and 2. When when asked which came first, the chicken or the egg, the correct answer is the giant three-headed serpent god. And with that final point, the 5v5 battle of good versus evil legends comes to an end, with good taking the Nexus. GG, guys. GG. Now who wants to play some Dominion? I called a little girl with a giant flaming teddy bear. Anyway, it's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Finally.
Banned cartoons, swastikas, Dragon Ball Z, and a Pikachu Photoshop to look like Hitler. It's not a game review, it's a game theory. Kyle Internet, welcome to Game Theory, the show that's done trying to relate its educational merit to Pokemon memes. Alright, you've waited long enough for this episode, so let's not waste any time with silly drawn-out introductions filled with desperate attempts at humor. Ho ho! I just called you out, son! The question today is whether or not Pokemon is racist, and I'm leaving the final answer up to you. Since Pokemon's first appearance in the Western market, there have been two major accusations of its content containing racist and hateful imagery. The first, which claims that Pokemon is pro-Nazi, is the easier to answer, so let's start there, shall we? Now, if modern first-person shooters have taught me anything, it's that Nazis are bad, okay? So why would anyone think that a game featuring such adorable little pocket creatures would also support ethnic cleansing? It all stems from this. A swastika emblazoned on the Koga's Ninja Trick trading card. Parents, after stumbling across this glowing red beacon of hate, drew the obvious conclusion that Golbat was a metaphor for white supremacy, meaning that the entire Pokemon franchise as a whole was enlisting children to become neo-Nazis. But we, as enlightened gamers, know that Nintendo wouldn't take this risk. We're talking about a company that replaced seals with snow monsters in the original Ice Climbers to avoid anyone claiming that they had you clubbing seals to death. As if anyone would actually care about that. Moving on. The swastika pattern, or manji as it's called in Japan, dates back long before goose-stepping became an army fad, as far back as 4000 BC. The word swastika literally means lucky, or well-being, and became a common symbol in Eastern religions, particularly Hinduism and Buddhism, representing everything from the sun, peace, and the number 10,000 to the entirety of creation. But World War II made everyone, particularly in the West, forget about all of that. In the late 19th century, the swastika was found on ancient pottery in Germany, leading researchers to conclude that it was an important religious symbol for Germanic ancestry. Soon after, a German nationalist movement that believed in the preservation of a pure-blooded Aryan master race took up this ancestral symbol as their logo. Because of its popular appeal at the time and its cultural significance, Hitler made sure to include it in his design for the Nazi flag. A regular Betsy Ross, that one. Moving on to the main course of today's episode, a question still contested 11 years after it first appeared. On January 5th, 2000, poet and children's book author Carol Weatherford accused the character design of Generation 1's Jinx as being an overweight drag queen version of black stereotypes. In response, episodes of the anime have been banned, figurines have been discontinued, and Jinx's skin was forever changed from black to purple. She also called out Dragon Ball's Mr. Popo, leading to his lip size being reduced and a palette swap from black to, oh my god, it's blinding. But for as absurd as her claims sound, there are centuries of evidence to back her up. It all dates back to minstrel shows. Not these. These. Stage acts featuring white comedians painting their faces with grease paint to portray black characters. Beginning in the 1830s and growing in popularity after the American Civil War, these performances portrayed African Americans as dumb, lazy, and superstitious. The grease makeup exaggerated the size of the performers' eyes and lips, thus embedding these traits in the popular culture's understanding of the black image. Cartoons especially adopted this visual shorthand, perhaps most famously Merry Melodies, as Bugs and the Gang had 11 episodes retroactively banned for its portrayal of other races.
Please don't beat me, Martha. Don't beat that tired old body. No, don't.
Minstrel shows continued until, get this, the 1960s, when the civil rights movement finally brought a close to these spectacles. But how does this all relate to Jinx? Well, there's obviously the exaggerated eyes and lips, but there's also her gloves, which were another common element in the minstrel costume. In addition, the name Jinx is an obvious reference to the word jinx, or something that brings bad luck, which can either relate to the aforementioned superstitious characterizations in minstrel shows, or a belief in voodoo, another common black stereotype. Plus, the fact that Jinx is a curvaceous woman-shaped Pokemon may have roots in the Mammy archetype, a specific stereotype for black women involving a large, imposing female who is the dominant, authoritative figure of the house. But though it's a compelling case, it's far from perfect. The fact that Jinx is an ice psychic type would have no explanation. In addition, though Carol Weatherford would claim that the blonde hair is a reference to a black woman's fondness for wigs and weaves, the fact that Queen Latifah wears fake hair is far from convincing evidence. Her complaints were countered by Pokemon supporters presenting two alternative theories. The first is that Jinx is based on a Nordic ice princess with black skin, an odd claim considering that black skin and Nordic heritage don't really go hand in hand. But there is indeed one figure that fits the bill. Hel, Norse guardian of H.E.'s single hockey stick. Hel the person is a female deity, daughter of Loki, and appointed by Odin as guardian of the dead. And unlike Western conceptions of Hel, the place, as a fire-filled land of suffering, Norse mythology depicts Hel as a frozen land of bitterness and pain, like New York in the winter, which would explain Jinx being an ice type. And like any good Norse woman, Hel is depicted with long, flowing blonde hair. This theory could also explain Jinx's weird opera singer getup. You know the phrase, "it ain't over until the fat lady sings," with the fat woman in a Viking costume? That all originates from a series of 4 operas by Wagner called The Ring Cycle. Think Lord of the Rings, but with Vikings and in German. Anyway, this huge 15-hour epic ends with a 20-minute solo by the Valkyrie Brunhild. Thus, the stereotype of opera singers and the appearance of Jinx. So those are some major points in this theory's favor, but here's the downside. Yes, Hel is said to have black skin, but only on half of her body. The other half is Caucasian. It's a good theory, but again, not perfect. Finally, there's the argument that Jinx is based on a fashion fad of 1990s Japan, Ganguro. This trend features Japanese girls tanning heavily to make their skin as dark as possible, then using white or light pink eyeshadows and lipstick to embellish their features. In addition, Ganguro girls heavily bleach their hair to be orange, blonde, or silver, and tend to keep the styling long. Between the dark skin, pink lipstick, and long blonde hair, it's a compelling argument, but the problem here is with the timing. According to a Time magazine article, the first Pokemon games took 6 years to complete, meaning development began in 1990. The Ganguro fad reached its height in the mid to late 90s between 1995 and 2000, which would mean that Jinx was included extremely late in the development cycle. But here's the kicker. If Jinx were indeed Ganguro, he would still be racist. Sociologists have traced the inspiration for the fad to the worldwide influence of hip-hop culture, with Japanese teen girls darkening their faces and accentuating their eyes and lips to emulate black females. In fact, Ganguro literally translates as blackface. So if Jinx's design was indeed inspired by this fashion trend, she would still be based on racial stereotypes, just ones that were twice removed. Anyway, there you have it. Jinx, the hip-hop fashion trending Norse Viking opera singer goddess racist Pokemon. Which theory is correct? I'll leave that for you to debate. Personally, I'm just glad that the Rastafarians haven't lodged any complaints about Tangela. Oh, and Mr. Popo? Yeah, he has no...
Let a TurboTax full service expert your taxes as soon as today.
Nintendo has been part of a cover-up since 1993, and we're more stupider as a result. This week, the truth. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory. We didn't invent the word truthiness, but by golly gosh, we believe in it. Have you ever played Star Fox? Chances are it's made you dumber. The game is just one big lie. It all boils down to one thing. Team Star Fox sucks at flying. Let's look at the facts. Do a barrel roll! Peppy Hare tells us in the closing minutes of the first level, and like obedient puppies, we follow his orders, pressing Z or R twice, joyfully seeing our ship spin like a top, deflecting all incoming lasers. And so we barrel roll our way through the Lilat system, past Starwolf on Fortuna, past Andross on Venom. So impressed were we with this little catchphrase that we make it into one of gaming's most recognizable memes. Even Google got in on the act. Do a barrel roll! Do a barrel roll! Do a f***ing barrel roll indeed. Peppy Hare is a lying bastard. This isn't a barrel roll. Not even close. It's called an aileron roll. If this show had any budget, I'd demonstrate the difference by hopping in a plane with an expert pilot, probably including some comedic routine where I was made sick by the G-forces created. Instead, you get some Mythbusters footage and a couple of still images. So you know the shape of DNA, the double helix pattern? Imagine a plane following the path of one helical strand. Or maybe you've ridden a roller coaster with a corkscrew, it's the same thing. That is the true meaning of a barrel roll. If there's another plane doing a complementary helix, it becomes a rolling scissor. The purpose of a real barrel roll is to slow the relative forward motion of the plane without changing direction, causing an attacker in the rear to fly ahead, which is called overshooting. The aileron roll, meanwhile, is exactly like in the game. The plane rotates around its longitudinal axis without leaving its linear path. In combat situations, it's useless. So here we are. We've been made to look like fools. Our prank calls to C-SPAN were for naught.
In Iraq, everyone was getting barrel rolled.
Oh, sure, I guess do a barrel roll is a lot more catchy than do an aileron roll. But unless this show miraculously gets thousands more viewers, many young gamers will grow up to be the laughing stock of their aviation schools. Tragic. But the lies don't stop there. During the dogfight missions, you have the ability to escape an attacker by performing this move. The game humiliates our intelligence by naming it a U-turn. The maneuver is actually called an Immelman turn, where a pilot makes a half loop upwards followed by a half roll, resulting in the plane being above the attacker and headed in the opposite direction. This is not to be confused with the split S, which is basically the downward equivalent of the Immelman. Now, players of Star Fox, myself included, would think that this U-turn would make an excellent tactical move considering it works so well when Wolf, Leon, and Pigma refuse to get off our asses, but frankly, it's not. The Immelman turn results in a considerable amount of speed loss, making a plane an easy target for an air-to-air missile. Even the more advanced half-Cuban 8, a speed-increasing maneuver that takes the Immelman and ends it with a nose dip back to the plane's original altitude, doesn't solve the problem. So now we have a second example that we're controlling a flying team with zero understanding of the basic maneuvers and how to use them properly. They're doing stuff that in a normal dogfight would get them killed. Star Fox seems to be a game of high-speed, high-intensity spaceflight, but that's just what they want you to think. Look at this. It's the last of the game's 3 advanced moves. The somersault, which in real life is just called a loop. The first rule of Air Combat 101 is to avoid movements in a purely horizontal or vertical plane of motion so as to disorient an attacker. Star Fox's quote-unquote strategic somersault ignores all that. But taking it further, one of the basic concepts of mid-air dogfighting is the trading of potential energy, or in this case altitude, with kinetic energy, or airspeed. I'll try to explain. As a plane climbs higher, it's fighting against gravity, exchanging some of its kinetic airspeed energy for potential height energy. When a pilot decides to descend, he's working with gravity, thus increasing his airspeed or kinetic energy at a faster rate. As a result of this energy transfer, a fighter jet's movement takes place not in a 3-dimensional sphere where any movement is equally likely, but rather inside what's called a tactical egg, where upward and downward movements are affected by these gravitational principles. How's all this relate to Star Fox? Look at the loop. It's a perfect circle. If you don't believe me, time it. The loop takes 3 seconds, exactly 1.5 seconds going up and coming down, which means that they're totally ignoring the physical principles of the tactical egg. The only explanation for this would be that they're going at an incredibly slow speed and braking while descending in the second half of the loop. In other words, they're not flying for their lives. They're not pushing the limits of their machine. Quite the contrary, it's practically a leisure flight. So let's review. No one on the Star Fox team knows the difference between an aileron roll and a barrel roll, despite it being one of the first moves taught in basic aerobatics courses. The Immelman turn, which is the fanciest move in their repertoire and the one that they rely on in open-air combat, realistically just makes a plane an easier target. And the fact that the loop ignores basic principles of gravity shows that they're in no big hurry. The saddest truth of all, though, is that these 3 moves are all reserved for air shows. Definitely not during life or death dogfights. Nintendo's Space Aces are really just a bunch of flight school rejects. But is it really all that surprising? I mean, would actual pilots want this guy part of their team?
Whoa! Help me!
I didn't think so. Do an aileron roll. Yeah, that's never catching on. Can't say I didn't try, though. Anyway, it's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
This family turned out pretty great.
It was our dream.
Stick your derrick in a hole and roll out the barrels, cause we're getting crude.
Roll out the barrel. We got the blues on the rock.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory. Today's episode will probably be, but is not meant to be, my most controversial one to date as we cover hot-button topics in international politics framed against gaming's most hot-button title. So cram yourselves into your Speedo because we're taking a dip in the life stream. What can be said about Final Fantasy VII that hasn't already been beaten to death 100 times over by countless fan sites? Nothing. Good, done, roll credits. But seriously, no one ever really looks at how much fantasy is actually in the Final Fantasy games. And you may be surprised by how realistic the 7th installment actually is. For the uninitiated, here's what you need to know. Lifestream in the game is spirit energy, the soul of the planet, existing underground in a form that looks a whole lot like my computer's default screensaver. Without getting too detailed, it's basically a collection of souls from all plants and animals that have lived and died on the planet. Mako is the name given to Lifestream in its liquid form, and it contains huge amounts of concentrated energy that a company named Shinra learned to harvest and convert into electricity. Shinra then gained a monopoly over this technique and basically took over the world, politically and economically, by being the sole provider of the planet's power. That's right, a world-dominating utility company. And they don't even own the waterworks. Evil power companies. Oh, Square, you and your imagination. Or not. Lifestream, an underground source of energy made from dead plants and animals, sounds a whole lot like fossil fuels to me. Coal, gas, and petroleum, which are found underground and are made from compressed plant and animal matter, accounting for around 86% of the world's total energy needs. And of those, none is more precious than oil. Black gold, Texas tea, which handles 1/3 of the world's energy consumption, topping 50% in some regions. Imagine, if you will, the following. Oil companies suddenly withholding their supplies. A world without oil. We would be crippled as cars would rust with empty gas tanks along the streets, and the 50,000 planes in the air each day would be grounded, ceasing all trade and shipping. Products made from oil, which includes everything from makeup to medicine and anything plastic, would be no more. Food wouldn't make it into the cities, and the world would grow dark as there would be no means to transport coal, whose burning produces 40% of the world's electricity. In short, a world in chaos. It's an interesting hypothetical scenario, but in the game, Shinra has complete political domination, and real-world electric companies aren't going to go and usurp the government anytime soon. But that doesn't mean that governments can't usurp the power companies. Some reports say that only 7% of the world's estimated oil and gas reserves are held by private companies, leaving over 90% to companies owned and operated by the governments of their respective nations. Of the top 20 oil-producing companies, 16 are controlled by national governments, including the world's most valuable company, Saudi Aramco, with an estimated value between $2.2 and $7 trillion. Can you imagine if a group of these oil-rich countries got together in an alliance to dictate who got the oil? Well, you don't have to, because that organization exists. It's called OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. The 10 largest oil companies in the world are all members. And if they don't like your country, they don't have to sell to you. That's what happened in 1973 when the quote-unquote oil weapon was first used against the US. Angered by the Western world's support of Israel, the Arab nations of OPEC formed a separate group to put the squeeze on us, making gas prices spike from, hold on to your hats, 38 cents to 55 cents per gallon. Watch out! But seriously, a big deal at the time. It caused a nationwide panic and gas rationing, so much so that Oregon had to cancel the hanging of Christmas lights. Now that's desperation. In other words, OPEC acts as a cartel, a group of competing companies working together to fix prices, marketing, and production on a global scale. And here's the other thing. You know how Shinra formed its own cities like Midgar, built its own military, and used its tremendous wealth to pay for experiments with genetics? Well, that's not a fantasy either. Saudi Aramco has built multiple compounds where its employees live. Some are able to hold up to 11,000 residents. And with nearly half of Iran's national budget coming solely from oil and gas revenue, any soldier or scientific discovery coming from the country belongs to some extent to the oil company. So as Uncle Ben said, with great petrol comes great responsibility. In short, I'm not a political person at all, absorbed in my raptures, foresides, and fortresses of peril. And ignoring political alarmists and claims of wars for oil, we've seen today that there's definitely a lot of money and power tied to energy. Some estimates floating around the web say that we have 40 years of oil left in the world. 40 years! It seems improbable to me, but even still, just imagine it. Shinra gained total control when they were the only ones left with a means of producing energy. Wouldn't it be the same for the last ones controlling the oil supply? Yeah, the Final Fantasy series has come up with some bizarre stuff. I mean, come on, a gun sword? And the gun doesn't work? That's stupid. But the take-home message today is that the story of Final Fantasy VII might not always remain just a fantasy. Unless, of course, the meteor business comes true, which it's supposed to in 2036, so we could all be dead long before oil companies get to us. Anyway, it's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
It's something that I feel when I eat a mega meal. I know it's working fine when I see a neon sign. Let me jump in red, I'm a human cold moves out.
Nintendo. Stick your Derek in a hole. Gather around the fireplace and grab your hot cocoa, cause it's time for a racist Christmas story. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that decided to hop on the movie bandwagon by making Pokemon Part 3, Part 2. Since you've all been such good little theorists, this week is just a little stocking stuffer to hold you over until the big presents arrive over the coming weeks. Call of Duty, Skyrim, Zelda, they're all in the pipeline, and they're pretty big episodes, so forgive me for the last few being a little shorter. But enough looking ahead, today is about black-colored Christmas traditions, and no, we're not talking about coal. So gather round as I read you my favorite Christmas tale, A Very Racist Jinxmas. A Very Racist Jinxmas by Matthew Patrick. Our story begins in a simpler time, 12 years ago, winter, 1999, when an episode of Pokemon aired on TV on a long-forgotten station, the WB. It featured Jinx dressed as Santa stealing toys from the shelves and showed that the fat man used these things as elves. Creepy? Yes, but not unexpected for a show where this went undetected. Holiday Hijinks, the episode was called, but some in the audience were quite appalled. One woman complained after the show, "That Jinx is a black cross-dressing hoe." The episode was banned, Jinx's skin changed from black, and all because of some political attack. But was she right? Is Jinx offensive? Perhaps this woman was a wee bit defensive, because though we've looked at fashion fads and Norse, this episode may lead us to Jinx's true source. So let's move away from cartoons in Japan to holiday traditions of Belgium and Netherlands, where there isn't Santa Claus but rather Saint Nick, Sinterklaas, equipped with his Pope hat and stick. This Santa doesn't come with little men in green tights. Instead, his posse comes straight from the heights. 6 to 8 black men he carries in tow, cast after their gig in hustle and flow. Zwarte Piet, Black Peter they're named, and around the lowlands adults aren't ashamed to blacken their faces and rouge their lips, dress like a page and travel on ships. You see, Saint Nick and Peter sail in from Spain, since living in the Poles just doesn't seem sane. Zwarte comes first to bring Christmas joy. Some candy, a cookie, a neat Christmas toy. But if you've been bad, you better watch out. You better not cry, you better not pout. Or Sinter and Pete will bring out their broom and beat you with it all locked up in your room. But that's not the worst. Oh no, my dear child. That's what you get when your sins have been mild. Just wait till you hear what's to be had for the little boy or girl who's really been bad. They're stuffed in a sack, kicking and screaming, hoping and praying that they're only dreaming. Once in the bag, they're carried to Spain, where family and friends never see them again. So let that be a lesson to all of you. Beware of Santa and his urban crew. But back on topic, is Jinx like Pete? Let me pull out the comparison sheet. Black skin, red lips, Santa's helping hand, but that's as far as the similarities stand. And does it matter? Black Pete ain't so great. His racist heritage is currently under debate. Some stories say Zwarte began as a devil, taking black-faced portrayals to a whole nother level. Yes, of course, he's a much-loved tradition, but does that excuse racism post-abolition? Like it or not, hateful portrayals live to this day, and like Call of Duty, show no signs of going away. Lazy Mexicans, smart Asians, the cracker, the Jew. Of racial stereotypes, we know a slew. But the holidays are special, a time of love and peace, a time to sit by the fire playing the latest release. But shouldn't it also be a time when we set aside differences as a single brotherhood of men? Anyway, I'm sure by now of rhyming couplets you're weary, so I'll end with this. That's just me and my game theory. Strap on your boots of diminishing shock, all you yarls and lasses, cause we're talking Skyrim. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the unrelenting shout of video game education. I just foos rode and he dawed. You know, I used to be a gamer like you, but then I took a bi-weekly gaming vlog on and just don't have as much time anymore. But that's not to say that I missed out on gaming's hottest meme since Do a Barrel Roll, which for all you newcomers to the show, I disproved 2 episodes ago. Shameless promotion for the win! Anyway, it should come as no surprise that we're talking about this.
Screen's going black, so
like you.
it
I took
doesn't
an arrow in the
sometimes.
knee.
I gotta go.
Arrow in the knee.
Arrow in the knee.
Arrow in
So,
The knee.
knee.
Skyrim's #1 epidemic isn't
I guess we're gonna
vampirism
have
or
a
rampant
thing.
stone flesh. It's
can
roadside
see
bandits
it on
taking
the
potshots
screen. I'm
at
just looking at the
Patele.
screen,
Which
but,
got me wondering, would an arrow to the knee
so we're
really
gonna
be
have an
such a
extra
severe
long
injury?
run
And more
tomorrow.
importantly, what could
So,
possibly explain
that's
so many
just a
adventurers
theory.
suffering from such